hello to everybody. Welcome to our webinar titled Unveiling Key Mistakes in Negotiation. I'm Siham Boda from Conflict Dynamics, your host for today's discussion. In our advert for this webinar, we said that less than 10% of negotiators are able to maximize value in negotiation. This is a staggering statistic, and we'd like to explore some of the mistakes that we all make in negotiations that hinder our success. What can you expect from today's webinar? We'll kick things off by introducing you to some key mistakes that negotiators frequently make, and we'll cover many of these as possible. We will cover topics such as failing to prepare, wrong signals, framing strategies, ungrounded assessments, and more. But I'll leave it to our experts who share indispensable negotiation strategies that can help you achieve better outcomes. At the end, we'll reserve time for your questions. Feel free to type your questions into the chat box throughout our webinar, which I'll be managing, and we'll do your best to address them. To make this discussion more enriching, we have two expert guests with us today. Professor Barney Jordaan from Vlerick University, author and seasoned mediator and negotiation practitioner. And Barney is joined by Pead, retired actuary, board director, negotiation practitioner, and judge at the recent negotiation competition for students in Rome. And we're very delighted to have Remy on the call, who's one of the organizers and founders of that competition. To kick things off, let's learn some of these common mistakes that can hinder our ability to achieve the best outcomes. Derek, what in your view is the most frequent mistake that you observe in negotiations?
I think undoubtedly it's failure to prepare. And you see it often. People turn up at the negotiation table, and a lot of them, you can see they're thinking they just have to wing it, see what happens, see what comes up, how we're going to play it, without doing any preparation. And then, of course, that usually ends in disaster for them. So, and I think probably one of the reasons why people don't prepare is they don't know what to prepare. So they think, the usual, they'll come along with a number and say, okay, this is the number we'd like to get. And we'll just arm wrestle until we get our way. And maybe we'll have to give up a little bit, but that's it. So, of course, there's a lot of things you need to prepare. And I'll just go through some of them. You have to decide, first of all, what you want. And not just what you want, but why you want it. And people sometimes fail to see the distinction between those two things. The what you want is my position. That's what I say I want. And the why I want is my interests. Why do I want what I'm asking for? And the simplest example of that is Johnny and Mary fighting over an orange in the class. They both want the orange. That's their position. I want the orange, she wants the orange. If they bother to ask each other a couple of questions, Johnny might want to eat the orange and Mary might want the peels to decorate a cake that she's doing in another class. So they could both get everything they wanted if they just asked questions. So that's the difference between positions and interests. So that's why it's important to know why you want what you want. Obviously, you need to know, you have to take a guess at least, do some research on your counterparts. What do they want? Why are they talking to you? Why are they at that table? And to work on that, we can go on, I can speak for hours on what we need to do. You might want to also negotiate the process. And it's important for you to put down the process first. In other words, you suggest the process. Don't wait for the other side to suggest the process, because that in itself has an anchoring effect if you state the process. And the process could be where we're going to meet, how many meetings, who's going to be involved, how we're going to resolve deadlocks, how long should these meetings last, etc., etc. And so discussion of the process is very important. And Barney, there's plenty of other things. I don't want to, maybe you can add a few.
Very good.
But I don't want to hog the show.
No, indeed. I think what you say about leading the process without dominating it is critical, because there's a lot of power in being able to lead or influence the process. And you can do it gently by simply making suggestions or asking questions. So, Derek, what's on your agenda? Great. I'm happy to talk about that. I've got these items to add. Are you okay with it? Where shall we begin? That's taking a lead in the process. What I find useful to help people prepare is, of course, to use preparation templates, because that forces you to put yourself in the mind of the other. You want to change their minds, so you need to know what's on their minds, right? You anticipate, you make assumptions, but you've got to check those. Using a devil's advocate sometimes to listen to you and give you critical feedback and say, but hang on, what about this? What about that? The other thing that I think we can do more often is to brainstorm questions. We used to brainstorming solutions to problems, but we don't brainstorm questions. So just think about all the questions you've got to ask about this negotiation, about yourself, your constituency, your bottom lines, your no-deal alternatives, the other sides. List them all, because the more questions you have, the more your brain will go in search of the answers to those questions. And then you add your preparation template. So I find that quite useful as preparation tools as well.
I just want to add one thing that you should probably do right up front is, if it's a serious negotiation, is agree that you're not, try and get them to agree to a no-shop agreement or exclusivity, so that for a period of, say, 21 days or whatever, we're not going to talk to anybody else. And we would like you not to talk to anybody else as well. Otherwise, they just use you for a sparring partner. Sorry, Barney.
Indeed, it's also useful to have some ground rules, right? For example, can we agree, Derek, that nothing is agreed until everything's agreed? This gives us flexibility to check each other out, to see where there might be tentative links between our different concerns and interests, but not to firm anything until we've gone through everything and we're happy with everything. And then we could always revisit things if we need to, in order to make a move on something else that we thought we'd agreed on, but that we might want to change.
Barney, do you have any thoughts on another mistake that's made? That was very insightful in terms of the comprehensive exercise that preparation actually entails, whether it's brainstorming, setting up agendas, how you're playing devil's advocate. That's really useful to know. Any other mistakes that you often spot?
Just to add, what Derek mentioned is critical, that preparation, but people sometimes think the preparation stops once we start negotiating. In fact, it continues, because that's when you get more information. So you have to constantly update your preparation as well. But for me, negotiation is a people activity. When I negotiate with a big company, I'm not negotiating with a company, I'm negotiating with an individual acting on behalf of the company. I've got to connect with that person. I've got to create a rapport with that individual. If one looks at the three core elements of negotiation, people, process, and the content or the problem, it's always people first. So what I think people sometimes do is they rush into a discussion about the issues. They neglect the process, as Derek said, but more importantly, they connect that human connection. Of course, if there's trust, that's fantastic, but I don't think one should look for trust in negotiation. It's too scarce a commodity to go in search of that. You might search forever. But I think if you can create interdependence, make people realize that we can work together, we need one another. If you can treat people with respect, if you can be seen as trustworthy yourself, that is gold in negotiation, because then people will tend to move in your direction, work with you, and give you information they might otherwise not disclose with you. So it's that people connection that matters. And this is where signaling is so important. It's a brain activity. And you're familiar with the fact that we have these two systems in our brain, system one, system two. The one is automatic. It's instant. It relies on memory, history, experience, assumptions, biases, stereotypes, psychological traps to jump to conclusions. And that's where 95% of our so-called thinking happens. But that's also where we receive signals and impulses from others, from what others say, from their body language and their nonverbal communication. And very often we get a response from somebody that we can't fathom, can't understand. But sometimes that is exactly what we elicited from them. We send the wrong signals. We come in not being friendly at all. We come in with ridiculous demands, insulting demands. We indicate that we can't be trusted because we chop and change our minds all the time. This all sends signals to your counterpart to which they will respond. So we've got to ask ourselves, what response would I like from Siham in this negotiation? And hopefully a positive response saying, I want to collaborate with you. Then I've got to ask myself, how do I elicit that? What are the signals I send through my words, my behavior, my nonverbal communication? And what signals should I try to avoid? Because I want her brain to be at rest, to say, hey, I'm no danger to you. I'm not here to attack you, to take advantage. But if I'm not careful, that's exactly the signal that I'll be sending to your brain, and that will push you away from me instead of bringing me towards you. So I think a lot of effort should go into understanding how the brain works and working on that initial rapport in the negotiation.
That's incredible. Something very useful to remember, especially in terms of, recognizing that you're already in a heightened state because people are anxious. They're in a stressful state, and you want them to be using the rational part of their brain and not have the amygdala stimulated and be in flight and fight response, whereas those responses are very generally short-term because you're thinking short-term. So that's a very useful component of the negotiation that we sort of forget about in terms of what's going on a sort of on the chemistry level that's unseen.
If I could add to that, there's research done by the Gottman Institute. Now, they did this research in the context of high conflict discussions between couples. But I think it's something that we can also apply in the negotiation context. And I think we might even recognize it in our own conflict negotiation behaviors. And they said that 96% of the time, one can predict the outcome of a conversation by looking at what happens in the first 3 minutes of that conversation. So essentially, you've got 3 minutes to get that conversation into a positive start. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we might have difficulty getting it back on a kind of a civil footing.
Any thoughts?
Some of the basic rules are, sorry, Siham.
No, any thoughts there? I was inviting you to share your thoughts with us.
Just be polite, be friendly, ask good questions. Try and find out what the other side wants. Share as much as you can without giving away the kitchen sink. Those are the kind of things that build trust. Politeness, friendliness, openness, just your posture, Some people, unfortunately, play the cards so close to the chest that they can't even see them themselves. and others, again, on the other end, put all the cards on the table, which is probably not a good idea anyway. But, just find common ground. Try to find some things that, if I see you've got a photo of your kids in kids' uniforms, you might say, I see your kids go to King Edward School, they play good rugby over there, blah, blah, blah. Just that kind of conversation to get, to find the common ground. And then, of course, they will have concerns. They may come to the table with concerns and serious concerns. And you must understand, listen to them, acknowledge them, even if you don't agree with them, but at least acknowledge their concerns. I can see why this might be traumatic for you. I can see why that could be a problem, blah, blah, blah. You can say that without agreeing.
That's quite an important reflection there, Derek. We often think that by listening to someone, it means agreement. And we always need to remind ourselves that, we're dealing with people who are coming in with their own views, their own strategies and agendas that they're trying to achieve. And we don't have to lose our humanity in the process of the negotiation. Any last thoughts on that comment, Barney?
If I just add to that, we always think, this is being nice and kind and soft, but in fact, it's not so much being kind to the other, it's being kind to yourself. Because if I treat Derek rudely, disrespectfully, if I just talk over him, I'm inviting him to do the same to me, and that is stupid. So if I do what Derek says, then I'm actually suggesting this is the way I'd like to be treated. And if he doesn't treat me like that, then I can hold him to account. To say, Derek, I didn't interrupt you. Please let me finish. It's a kind of a selfish altruism. I'm being kind to him, but at the same time, I'm doing this so that he would get the point and treat me exactly the same way.
We have a saying in conflict dynamics, which is go slow to go fast. And it's, the going slow part involves building that rapport with the parties and establishing ground rules and how we're going to treat each other in the negotiation. And then actually your negotiation speeds up and becomes more efficient because there is that level of certainty that's been established as to how different parties will respond and treat each other. Any other comments or mistakes that you can share with us, Derek?
Sorry, Derek, you go first.
No, Barney, you can go.
Let Barney finish. There's obviously got something to say at the last point.
A bit of a bugbear of mine is the fact that people often operate in one gear only, one mode. We go in there, we compete, and then we walk away and say, hey, we beat the other side, without realizing that we may have lost twice. Because if we approach the person in a highly competitive way, all we're doing is make it less inclined to help us meet our concerns, to get the best deal we can. And we probably damage or destroy the relationship we might need to make the agreement stick, to make it easier to resolve disputes arising from the agreement, or to get ongoing deals from that party. So we have to be flexible. And essentially, it's a question of, it's a matter of moving between collaboration and competition, but always deciding what is my going in strategy. If I could just maybe show you what seems to be a complicated model, but it's not so complicated. And it starts with what Stephen Covey said. We always have to begin with the end in mind. And what is the end? It's my goal in negotiation. Is this a negotiation where I need to win? Yes, because it's once-off, no longer-term relationship consequences. I've got leverage here. I haven't got much time. Those are the situational factors that might make me think, okay, this is a win negotiation. This doesn't mean I behave badly, but I'm going to be quite firm here. Or is this one where my focus is mutual gain? This is for the longer term. This is not win-win. Win, I think, it's a silly concept. What does it actually mean? It's about looking to maximize our mutual gain, but not equalizing that gain, because we might have different levels of power. But beginning with a goal, I say, what's my current thinking about this negotiation? How do I see the people on the other side? As my competition, or as somebody who holds the key to my salvation here, my success? How do I see the process? Fight to win or collaborate for mutual gain? How do I see the problem? Either or, both of us want one orange, there's only one orange, it's a zero-sum problem, or as Derek explained, well, we want different parts of the orange. So I've got to check my current thinking about this negotiation. And I have to do this from one negotiation to the next. If I'm a very accommodating person, and I see negotiation as a process to make friends, and my goal is to win, that's not going to be an appropriate frame. I have to change my frame and say, I have to be much firmer here. This is not either or necessarily, but I've got to go in there very firmly. And this will determine, my goal will determine, am I going to compete to claim value and use the kind of tactics that you see there, what we call distributive tactics? Or am I going to go in there to collaborate and create and claim value, make the pie bigger before slicing it? Then I'll use these tactics, integrative tactics. But no negotiation.
You're not sharing your slide. I thought you said you wanted to share.
I thought I was. Oh, my word. I'm talking away here thinking that everybody's on the same page as me. So my humble apologies.
You're sharing now.
Yeah, there we go. So there's old Stephen Covey's maxim there. So my goal, is it to win or is it mutual gain? The situational factors will determine what my goal is. Longer term, short term, lots of power, little power, enough time to collaborate, to go slow, to go fast, or little time to collaborate. And then I go back and say, what's my current thinking about those core dimensions of negotiation? And that'll determine my strategy. I decide this is a game that I need to win. I will compete to claim as much value as I can. I'll be highly assertive. My tactics will be what we call distributive. If it's a mutual gains goal that I have, then I must make the pie bigger first before I claim value. And these are the kinds of tactics I use there. But my behaviors in both instances should remain constant: respectful, good listening, open-minded, be firm but flexible. But no negotiation is either the one or the other. Mostly it's a combination of the two. But it's these kinds of things we have to take into account to decide what is the strategy we will begin this negotiation with, and when do we change? When do we adapt? Is it because the environment changes, my power increases or becomes less? Is it because of the other person's tactics and behaviors? Or is it because the particular issue is a competitive zero-sum issue, while we can compete on other issues that are less competitive, for example? So really it's about being very sure about what strategy you're going to go in with and when you change. And that's part of the preparation that Derek was talking about as well.
Yeah, people mistake win-win negotiations for 50-50 and therefore weak. It's just cutting the pie right at the start and that's not true. I mean, a win-win negotiation is where both sides are better off having done the deal. It does not mean that it's 50-50. It could be 95-5, but as long as the other side is also, it's better for them. Doing the deal is better than their best alternative. So, I think it was Lawrence Susskind or somebody wrote the book, Good for You, Great for Me. That's the, I suppose, the ultimate aim of any negotiation. I wanted to say on the point of, what the relationship is going to be like after the negotiation is finished, and therefore what strategy you will use. I mean, even if you're buying a house, which might be a one-off transaction, where the relationship is not so important, you never know when you're going to meet that person again. So I would try to keep on good relationships with everybody and negotiate with, even if it's just a once-off deal. But to get to the next deadly sin, I suppose we want to go there, is making an offer when you shouldn't and not making an offer when you should. So people ask, should I make the first offer or shouldn't I make the first offer? And the answer is there's dangers to both of them. Making the first offer, there's advantages. This is what we call an anchoring effect. It can set an anchor that can influence the rest of the negotiation.
Sorry, Barney.
Derek, on that note, people say, you should never make the first offer. Others say always. Some say, well, it depends, which is the better answer. We always talk about the anchoring effect, right? The first offer can have an anchoring effect. It pulls the other person in your direction, but that only works. It only has that pull effect, the adjustment effect, anchoring and adjustment. If, first of all, I have a fair idea of what your interests are, and I think I can meet at least some of those. Secondly, if there are numbers involved, I can justify the high or the low number that I'm coming in with. I have some outside reference point. It's not just sucked out of my thumb. That might be a good time to make my first offer, because then it could have this effect that you will adjust whatever you had in mind to come closer to what I have, because I'm here to help you and I can help you. I can solve some of your interests, but there's a price you have to pay. And Derek, and I think you're of the same mind as far as that is concerned, right?
Yes, I would say that, the danger, of course, of making an offer when you don't know as much as the other side does is that exactly that. You don't know what's possible. So I would say that the time to make, don't make an offer unless you know at least as much as the other side about the value of the product or service on offer. And when you do know, get your offer in first. So there's a definite advantage to getting the first offer in, but it's definitely stupidity to make an offer when you don't know much. And sometimes an employer, if you're applying for a job, an employer might put you under a bit of pressure by asking you to make an offer, and by saying something like, so what are your salary expectations? And then you're on the spot. And I would normally advise people to deflect it a bit by saying, I'm told that people in this area with my kind of skills and experience should be getting about that, but that's just my information. You've obviously got better information. Well, so that's what we call a soft offer.
So what I'm hearing from you is whether to get first offers in or not, it really depends.
Yes.
And one needs to be able to assess the situation and decide what would be in your best interests in that particular scenario. Any other mistakes that you've observed frequently, Barney?
I sometimes think we talk too much. By talking too much, we first of all risk boring the other side. We can't focus for long anymore. Okay, because of all sorts of impulse, we struggle to focus on what people are saying. So we get this glazed look in our eyes. So the more we talk, the more bored people might get. Secondly, we give away too much information too soon, perhaps. So rather, I usually suggest to people, ask questions so you can get information. But then practice WAIT, W-A-I-T, and that stands for why am I talking? What benefit is there in me now talking? Let me rather get as much information as possible. When it is my turn to talk, keep it brief. Don't have too many arguments. People will focus on the weakest argument and ignore the better ones. Choose one or two things to back up what you're asking for. If people want more information, let them ask questions. I've sat in many collective bargaining negotiations where management come with these incredible PowerPoint presentations showing everything. And right at the end, the message is, sorry, we haven't got money to pay you. And not only are people bored, it's still a signal that says, listen, talking to us is not going to get you far. And I don't think that's very productive. So talk less, listen more.
That's the old chestnut that's very difficult. I think it's a skill and a practice all on its own. Any thoughts on that, Derek?
85% listening, which includes asking questions. Asking a question I don't see as talking, I see that as listening. So, and then 15% stating something. And make sure that as part of your preparation, of course, know that when you speak, you know exactly what you're going to say, and don't go off script. That's one of the points I have here is some people throw in off-the-cuff comments that can get them into serious trouble. Usually take the form of ungrounded assessments. Now, Siham, you will remember the case we had in the championship that we took part in, where we were negotiating on behalf of an airline pilots association, Lufthansa, in fact, and against Lufthansa management. And one of the comments that somebody from their side threw in is, you guys, it's not a skill anymore. All you do is press buttons. And so, I mean, if it wasn't a simulation, I would have got angry, but I feigned being angry anyway, just for the role play. And I said to him, are you saying you're quite happy to fly with somebody who's learned flying on video games? And won't, what's he going to do when the engine, when the instruments stop working, etc., etc. And I came across quite aggressively, and I put him on the back foot. And we ended up getting much more than anybody else for that particular round. And it's because somebody just threw in an off-the-cuff, ridiculous comment, and that happens often. So beware what you say. You should be able to justify it, because it can come back to bite you.
Also, you don't always know how much the other side knows. So you might throw off an off-the-cuff statement thinking, people would be gullible and believe it. And then before you know it, I remember in one of these sessions, a calculation needed to be made, and the parties across the road didn't realize Derek was an actuary, and he got into the numbers very, very granularly, for want of a better word. And, that really scuppered the progress of the negotiation, because we automatically didn't trust the other side in that. So having that ungrounded assessments really makes you, I want to use your word from earlier, it just makes you look a little silly, Barney, I think.
Yeah.
Any comments on that, Barney? While we're
I think it's Winston Churchill who said, "We are masters of the unspoken, but slaves to what we let slip out." So be careful. But something that I often get asked is, how do I deal with people who just stonewall, hard negotiators, just blocking? And I think sometimes, again, the brain says, "Oh dear, what's going on here? They are threatening me. They're not moving. I become fearful of whether I'm going to do the deal here." And then sometimes we act inappropriately. We try to go head to head with them. And unfortunately, they play that game better than we do. Now, it's George Bernard Shaw who said, "You should never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig loves it." So sometimes you might have to walk away because it's going to be a long-term pain and agony to be linked with that particular individual. But I think before one walks away, what I usually advise people is, we are self-interested beings. We can't deny it. We have to look after ourselves, our own well-being. We have to live our safety, our food, etc. And in negotiation as well, nobody negotiates to lose. We negotiate to win satisfaction of our interests. Some stupidly just want their position satisfied. But ultimately, we're looking at meeting our core interests. And the trick, I think, is to play to the other person's self-interest, to show them how the way they play the game is actually not to their benefit. What they stand to lose by playing that way. I was going to give you some stuff, make some concessions, but I'm not prepared to do it if you're going to act in that fashion. So show them what they stand to lose, but also what they stand to gain. If I can give you a brief example, I used to train buyers from a large clothing retailer in South Africa. They create their own fashions, and young women, mid-20s, late 20s, very smart, coming for training on negotiating value for the long term, right? With their suppliers of cloth and material. But these people supplying them are tough. They are all men, small family-owned businesses, and they negotiate hard. All they want is volume and highest price, maximum volume, highest price. After a session, one of the young women came to me. She said, "This is great. Collaboration works with most of my clients, but there's one, if I see his number on my phone, I freeze because I know what's going to happen. It's going to be a slanging match. Eventually, we have to do a deal because we need each other. But he always makes me feel dirty because he says, why do they send a young girl like you to negotiate with somebody like me? I want to speak to your procurement director directly." So it diminishes status and really makes an enemy out of it. And I say, "What do you do to him?" She said, "I give him the worst deal I can." I said, "No, have you ever met him?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, grab a cup of coffee somewhere in Cape Town when it's peacetime and say you want to meet him in person." She came back to me. She said, "What a nice man." She says, "It's Jekyll and Hyde. He seems to have this negotiation personality, and then he's himself." She says, "But what a gentleman." And then I told him how he made me feel. He was horrified. He was even more horrified when I told him, and pardon the expression, that I screw him over every time. So sometimes making the other person realize what they lose through their approach and behavior can actually do the trick as well.
Yeah, we don't like to lose. So that's a valuable thought. Any other comments that you have, Derek, before we start looking at some of
I was thinking of something I posted about the other day is when negotiations should end, but they don't. And a negotiation should theoretically end when somebody cannot get a deal better than their best alternative. In other words, they should walk away. Sometimes both parties should walk away, but sometimes even when they should walk away, they don't. And and there's a couple of reasons for that. There's the sunk cost fallacy. We've spent so much, we've invested so much time and effort and resources that we can't stop now. We must keep going. And all this emotional involvement, things like pride, or ego, or the fear of being perceived as a failure, can sometimes override logical decision making. Overconfidence, we're going to make this work, and we can only improve. So and lack of information, they don't understand their BATNA well enough. They don't understand when they should walk away. That's why it's quite critical to have a very good analysis of your BATNA and test the realism and the practicality of that BATNA before you actually go into negotiation. So yeah, that's when people, and of course, momentum, inertia, sometimes it just develops a life of its own. We've been meeting every week now for months. We must carry on. We must carry on. And it's bizarre, but this happens in practice.
Yeah, sometimes you need to know when to let go.
Mm.
And that's quite a skill. Any thoughts on that mistake that you often observe, Barney?
People sometimes think they have no alternatives. They've got to do this deal, and that weakens them. You can always walk away. It may be painful, but it might be better to walk away given the cost of long-term engagement with this client and hopefully find another client at some point than being stuck with that client. Of course, if you have alternatives, you are in the stronger bargaining position, but then you should also not push too hard simply because you've got other alternatives. But absolutely, at some point you have to say, look, we're going to walk away. Looking at what is available, what life is still left in the negotiation compared to the costs and risks of walking away, we'd rather accept the cost and risk of walking away than being stuck with this particular client.
Great. I think we should turn to some of the questions that have been posed in the chat. But one of the themes that have come out of today is not to neglect the emotional side of things, whether it's the people we're dealing with, what they're bringing to the table, how to learn to let go, what's preventing you from letting go, looking at issues around pride and ego, and also what's happening in the brain that's actually directing a response to a specific scenario. So we don't always read about all of that in the textbooks, and I'm really grateful for both your insights, Barney and Derek. Let's just go to the chat. There was an interesting question here by Lecho Gondolo Pahatha, where they asked, Professor Jordaan spoke about the importance of human connection. And I think that links very well to what we've been talking about. And the question posed is, what is your view on the role of AI in negotiations, if there is any role AI could play, and its impact on the human connection factor?
I was hoping nobody would ask a question like that because, without that human connection, where will it go? So it'll be machine-driven. Machine learning will be used to improve negotiation competencies between different bots. So we are going to lose the ability to connect with the other person during the negotiation. There may still be room for some kind of connection before or after the machines have done their job. And if there are those opportunities, we need to exploit them. We need to use them. But it's very similar. If you today tender for something, the first thing you have to do is give a price. And if they're happy with the price, then the negotiation starts. There's no negotiation in the beginning. But if you are able to influence the requirements, I'm not saying in an underhand way, but if you have knowledge and you can help people ensure that they buy the right stuff, because the people putting together the tender requirements are not necessarily the people who know what it is all about. So there could be some kind of influencing, but on an ethical basis. But once human interaction takes a backseat, everything we teach about negotiation will have to be revisited. We are busy with a project on that, but it's going to change things fundamentally. There's a great article by a very well-known American negotiation professor, Noam Ebner. It's called Negotiation is Changing. You can Google it, Negotiation is Changing. And it's quite scary what he predicts might happen. Not just in terms of negotiating with machines, but also how technology is changing us. It is changing us as people, and we have to realize that. We can't focus so much anymore. We can't remember anymore because we don't have to remember anymore. It's all online. So critical question, but we don't know where this is going, unfortunately. Wish I could give you a clear answer. And talking about answers, by the way, it's easy for Derek and me to sit here and give armchair comments, but we all know how difficult this can be in the heat of the moment. We fully understand that.
I'm glad the question came up because I mean, I use AI to possibly to come up with potential win-win solutions. What I don't use it for is sitting at the table opposite my counterparts and asking ChatGPT questions. That one thing that AI can't do yet, and probably never will be able to do, is help you to build trust and mutual respect. That that's still the realm of human beings. So human interaction is, I can't see it changing, but it's always going to be very important in negotiation. So that doesn't mean it can't be used.
But look at this now. This is something that the bigger retailers are using. Amazon and others, Pactum, automated negotiations, taking out the human factor. And it's also done to avoid the human factor, to avoid people becoming too close in the negotiation. So this is scary stuff. Okay, the human is taken out of the equation completely. So it is happening.
You know, if it's for something like commodity prices, then I suppose that's inevitable that AI will come into the picture.
Yeah.
But for slightly more complex and very complex negotiations,
hopefully we will remain involved. Yeah.
And I think it's that human factor that sort of spoke to a lot of our participants today. Tim Kulu said, "What a light bulb moment there, Barney, about signals, and so profound." That human connection and how to manage the complexity of negotiating with people and everything that they bring to the table.
Maybe just on that, if I have a look at the SCARF model of put in the chat, David Rock, he's a neuroscientist. It's all about signals and how the signals either create a toward response, putting people towards us, or an away response, pushing people away from us. So have a look at that.
Oh, thank you for that resource and reference. I certainly look forward to exploring that further. And then just a last question I see in the chat here, which said, I think it was something you mentioned, Derek, where no shop agreements effective? What happens if the other party breaks the agreements? What are the remedies? So any thoughts on that for Andrew?
Well, any agreement can be broken, I suppose. So it's better to have one than not to have one. What are the remedies if somebody breaks the agreement? I suppose if you're going to prove financial loss, then you maybe got a case. I think it would be very harmful to the party breaking the agreement, to the reputation. These things, the reputation is all you've gotten. And if you lose that, then not many people are going to want to do business with you.
Yeah, indeed.
So, it's a concern. It could be broken, but I wouldn't lose sleep over it. I'd rather have this no-shop agreement than not.
See, Raymond, there's a question: to what extent does one have to adjust your strategy and approach with purely online interactions? I don't think you have to. We think, oh, it's online, we can't check people's body language anymore. Now, how many people are body language experts? What you see on the screen is probably the best indicator of what's going on in the person's mind. They move, hand movements sometimes, the smile, lack of smile, a real smile, fake smile, eye contact. There you have it. That's what gives us the most signals. But what the research tells us is that it's best to change your medium that you negotiate with. So, for example, if you and I are going to negotiate, I might start with a phone call. There's something quite intimate about a phone call still. Hey, Raymond, this is me. Just want to connect with you, talk about our negotiation, just get the logistics sorted out. But I also have a couple of questions because I'd like to prepare as well as I can. So would you mind if I just asked you a couple of questions? Feel free to answer whatever you feel free to answer. There's connection. And then say, could we maybe just have a quick video call next week, the day before the negotiation, just to make sure everything's okay and that there's no other information you need from me. Set up that. And then you go into the negotiation. And then maybe during the negotiation, you can have an offline chat on WhatsApp about any outstanding issues. So please try and stay away from email if you can, because even the subject line sends a signal. Rejection of your offer, immediately. Negative. Rather say feedback on your offer. Even if it amounts, at least they are then they will read it with a different mindset. So we've got to be so careful with email in negotiation and in communication generally, of course.
I think that speaks very well to Herman Creel's question in the Q&A, where he said, I'm aware that I come across at first meeting as stern, if not unfriendly and approachable. How do I remedy this without seeming false and inauthentic?
Very important question.
Maybe that's maybe where the phone call comes in.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Make that initial phone call so that people get to know you even before you walk into the room.
Indeed. Derek, and added to that, and pardon the expression, but we all have BSDs. It's a bullshit detector. So some people come in very flamboyantly, but others can quickly see through it. If there's a disconnect between how the person behaves and speaks and what follows, also their body language and nonverbal communication, I would say it's fine to be rather stern, as long as you are consistent in terms of your behaviors from that point on. Consistent, by that I mean that, yes, you are stern, and therefore in interaction, you may also be stern. You might relax later on, but don't try and change it just to please others. I sometimes have people coming to me and say, what others say they're too direct. I say, you can never be too direct. What you have to watch out for is how you express your directness, the intensity with which you express it, and whether you are direct about the issues or about the person. The old thing of be soft on the person, but be very direct and firm on the issues. So, but don't fake it. Stay as you are. Nothing stops you from having the odd smile, of course. That also helps. But
even if you are a stern person by nature, you can still be polite.
Absolutely.
And that's what's really
respectful. Yeah, indeed.
And I think the other thing is taking an interest in the other party. So
Yes,
even though you're stern and you might seem unapproachable, if you take an interest in the other parties and ask questions, that should soften things a lot, because then people won't feel like you're that unapproachable, and that should be able to break the ice for you quite nicely.
And that's often the best way to connect, is to talk about them, right?
Make it about them, not about you. And we've got another nice question.
The biggest compliment you can pay anybody is to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, in today's world, what's that? 30 seconds, eh?
No, it's 8.
Is it 8? Oh, yes, 8, you said.
It was 12. It's 8. A goldfish can focus on your face for 9 seconds before it becomes bored. We can focus for 8 seconds on average.
We're really working our way down that food
chain. Absolutely.
A nice question from Felicity. What advice do you have for managing the expectations of mandators in negotiations?
Felicity, I find that's one of the big problems, that we mandate too soon. We mandate before we even understand the full problem, without even understanding the other side's interests. We already have a perfect solution to our problem as we see it, based on our information, and focused on winning our position. And I think that's where things go wrong. What adds to the problem is that the negotiator is then motivated, not just by normal self-interest, but by self-interest 2.0. In other words, there's a bonus waiting at the end of this. You'll be shamed if you come back with a low price, or you give away a high price, or whatever the case might be. And that in combination, I think, sometimes gets people stuck in the negotiation. So ideally, on the theme of going slow to go fast, the mandate should come once we have a better idea of the party's interests and the options available for meeting those, the common interests, the compatible interests, and the conflicting interests. I think then one can make a more informed decision because negotiation is decision making, and you want to understand the full problem and the solutions to the problem before you decide what is the best one. But that's not often not how it works. Jerry?
Yes, I was going to say that, I would prefer to go into, when I'm representing a client, I prefer to go in without a mandate to do a deal.
Indeed.
And because then I'm free to explore and to explore various possibilities. And hopefully the person on the other side is too. So my excuse would be whatever we come up with here, I again have to go and present to my principals. And so I'm not bound. I'm free to come up with all kinds of wild solutions. And some of them might be very good, totally outside of what I or my client expected. But, the freedom to do that is what gets taken away when you mandate it.
Can I just ask a quick question with Women's Month just having passed? Have you perhaps, either of you, Derek or Barney, perhaps observed mistakes that we as women frequently make when we negotiate?
I can give you a quick answer, but it's a textbook answer, that women are very good, but better than men at negotiating on behalf of somebody else, but they're worse at men when negotiating for themselves.
Derek, I do think that's even changing as well. I deal with a lot of master students. These are bright people, MBA students, executives, and I must say, what makes me happy is to see the increased level of assertiveness of women in negotiation when we do simulations with them. And secondly, I think we have the wrong view of assertiveness. We think this is bullying, but that's the ability to know what you want and to confidently ask for it, or to say no to what's not good enough, or to say no, not this, but this might work. But what I do sometimes miss among male negotiators is social intuition and social intelligence. The ability to figure out or try to figure out what's in the other person's mind. I think as men, that is where the problem lies. We are sort of sometimes not just assertive, but aggressive. And we say, you look after your problem, I look after mine. So I think from where I'm sitting, we as guys have a lot to learn. Because the most beautiful thing to observe is somebody who can be quietly assertive, yet empathic. I mean, that's a joy to behold.
It was interesting for me in the World Championships for students, which I've been privileged to be a judge on for the last couple of years, that the best teams were always led by women.
Well, just one last question before we have to unfortunately wrap up, and that comes from Remy, and he asked, I would be interested about what you guys thought about ethically ambiguous tactics, how to prevent them, how to counteract them. That is a big topic, but if you have a quick soundbite, Derek or Barney, on ethically ambiguous tactics, how to prevent them, how to counteract them.
Remy, this is the problem. I wrote something long ago with somebody and about ethical fading in negotiation. It often starts because of people's view of negotiation. Oh, this is just a game. Or, everybody does it. I'm a very honest person, but when I negotiate, I think that's part of the problem. For me, the answer lies in you being absolutely ethical. You don't have to disclose everything, but what you disclose must be true and verifiable. And then there's research, you will be aware of it, Remy, that goes back with Neil Rackham and them on what do effective negotiators do. They give feelings commentary. In other words, if they believe somebody is not ethical, they hold them to account. They don't attack the person. Remy, come on, you're a liar. No, Remy, this information you gave me, I'm sorry to say, but it doesn't make sense. It's so out of sync with what we have, and ours is based on verifiable data. How are we going to deal with this? So call it out, but be careful of slipping into the way people play the game. Because of self-interest, it's so easy to do it. Derek, I'd like to hear your take on that.
Yes, one thing is for sure, never tell a lie. And it's sometimes difficult to do when there's some stuff that you want to withhold. And it comes in the realm of answering difficult questions. What is your best price, to be a typical example? A difficult question. your best price, you might know you're still going to make a profit at half of what you're asking for, but you don't want to tell them that.
Yeah.
So don't lie, but leave room for negotiation posturing, so that you can play these games, and negotiation is really a game. The main thing is don't tell lies.
No.
You will be found out.
Your reputation is at stake, and that arrives at the next negotiation before you. Siham, I just posted something there. It's a Harvard article on multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. So especially people who are struggling with negotiators who don't want to move, give them more than one solution. Read about it. There's some great clips by Sept and others on the internet as well, because it's a tactic that, in my experience, actually works to get movement and to give people a choice. Which one do you want to talk about? Package 1, 2, or 3?
Oh, such valuable insights from both you, Derek and Barney. As we wrap up today's webinar, heartfelt thanks to you both for sharing your expertise so generously with all of us. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us. It is encouraging to be reminded that negotiation is a skill that can be honed and refined, and we can avoid these mistakes in a step towards maximizing value. If you have any further questions or would like to connect with us, please reach out to Conflict Dynamics on our website, sign up to our newsletter, and receive any updates that's happening there. We look forward to assisting all of you on your negotiation journey. Thank you once again for attending, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Siham. Thanks, Derek. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, guys.
All appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.